It's time for today's travel and cruise industry news. With the latest from travel and cruises around the world, here's your host, Chillie Falls.
Good morning. Welcome to Travel and Cruise Industry News. And we had one of my guests for the morning popped in a couple minutes before she couldn't hear me. And it was all on my end, so I'm not sure what happened. So I had to switch around, change cameras, change microphones, do all that in about 2 minutes time. Anyway, welcome to Travel and Cruise Industry News. Wow, a little out of breath here. All right, this is going to end up being maybe one of my most important shows of the year. Not only is my guest this morning an extraordinarily timely subject to talk about, she's also one of my favorite guests. So anyway, we got several other things that we're going to discuss after I talk with Kristy. Carnival celebration Christened, the Diamond Princess returns, Disney Fantasy assists Coast Guard and rescue operation, MSC Seascape on its Transatlantic to pick me up down there in Miami. Yeah. Travel to Cuba. How about that as a subject this morning? I'm excited about the information that came from Hot Air Tom. One quick note, folks. I've talked about the August cruise I did on Norwegian Sky as the Hot Air Tom cruise. Well, there's going to be a whole new definition to that phrase. I'm not going to talk about it today because we got too much to do. However, the whole concept of Hot Air Tom cruise, I promise you, for almost a month, I'm going to take Cindy's place and I'm going to be the one going around the ship going, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to do exactly like Cindy does. We'll talk about that another day. All right. With no further ado, I'm going to bring in my guest this morning. Wow, she is, there's so much you can say about Kristy. She's an entrepreneur. She's a travel agent. She's a disabilities advocate. She's a featured speaker. She owns and operates Incredible Memories Travel. She's hooked up with the folks over at Will the World, and they're doing an all-accessible cruise and trip to Alaska for 2023. We talked about that on this channel before. But anyway, with no further ado, here's my guest, Kristy Durso. Welcome back to Chillie Chats.
Hi, Chillie. Thank you again for having me, and thank you for such kind words. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna pretend a minute this morning. I'm going to end up asking you more than just the questions that I told you because I can't go without asking you about a couple other things. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute.
All right.
This is an extremely important topic for this week because so many people are going to be flying. I walk up to a ticket booth at an airport. I not walk up, I roll up. Let's say that I'm in a wheelchair. And I check in and the ticket agent says, oh, we have to check the wheelchair with the luggage. What do you respond and why, and what's your backup to do that?
My response is, first of all, this would apply to the very slimlined power chairs that are very, very lightweight, depending on their dimensions. Some of them would be able to do this. This applies to manual chairs primarily, but by law, according to the Air Carrier Act, a manual wheelchair can be stowed in the cabin. It is first come, first serve for that closet up front, but that closet is actually not designed for the luggage of the flight attendants or anybody else. That closet is designated as wheelchair space. And as long as your wheelchair can either collapse and fit in it or come apart and fit in it, that closet is for you. Now, if the airline has 100 seats or more and does not have a closet, then the airline is required to strap your seat into a chair on the plane. And if the plane is fully booked, that means that by law, somebody can be bumped from that flight so that your chair can go into the plane itself. So there are 3 ways that I can get my chair on the plane. The first is in that closet. That's my preferred thing. It's the easiest. But if it doesn't fit in the closet, then we try the overhead bin. And then again, if they have a 100 passenger seats or more, then we'll strap it into a seat. So.
Okay. Is there anything a scooter user can do?
If it's one, there are a few lightweight scooters. So if that scooter is small enough to collapse and fit into those spaces, then they can fit into those spaces as well. But it has to be able to break down and fit into those dimensions. So the law is the mobility device can go into the cabin if it fits and the pilot deems it safe.
Okay. My lightweight scooter that I use here at home that I can lift in and out of my car, it can collapse down. I could do that on a plane. But like my scooters that I rent from Scootaround for my cruises,
those are too big.
They're too big, even though the new ones come apart into 5 pieces.
Right.
But that would then be 5 things to deal with, not 1.
Right.
So,
well, it doesn't matter. You break it down. I've had my chair in various places. Sometimes the wheels go behind the last row. Sometimes they go in the overhead, then my smart drive. And anything that you put in the overhead that is medical equipment doesn't count towards your baggage allotment, and it has to be allowed in there because it is medical equipment and they need to find a space for it in the cabin if it fits.
Yeah, it's just like they have to let me have my portable oxygen unit.
Yes.
For instance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Are they doing any better with taking care of wheelchairs and scooters that have to go in the luggage compartments?
Well, you'll hear mixed reviews on that. In my experience and what I have seen, I'm still seeing wheelchairs get damaged. I'm still hearing about things being broken. Now, I will say the response is good. If something does break, as long as you get that claim in there before you leave the airport, then the response has been fantastic. But it still has to go up that conveyor belt to get into the aircraft, which is a lot of times where the problem initiates, because if it's not balanced right on there, and this is especially when you're talking about some of those bigger things, it may not be balanced quite right, so then it falls off, or when it gets in there, they don't tie them down. There's no way to secure it once in that cargo area, and that's where a lot of the breaks do happen, is when we have it get in there and it's not strapped down. I'm pretty sure that's why before, if my chair was in the cargo, that's where it ends up getting broken. One time I had a bolt on my chair completely sheared off.
Wow.
I have no idea how they did that to my foot plate. So it's been damaged 6 times in the last year on times that I couldn't fit it into the cabin. So I can't, as much as I'd love to say yes, they're doing a great job now, I can't say it.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, my next question, which is over and above the main subject for today, has to do. It's in Virginia. It was 21 degrees this morning, folks. I went out for a nice brisk walk. No, I didn't. I'm freezing to death. I need to get on a boat again soon. Well, it just happens that ties in to my next question, because you have been doing some training for Holland America, and I'm going to get on a Holland America boat here in a week.
Excellent. Excellent.
Tell me about your Holland America experience.
Well, I have been on 4 Holland America cruises this year. So 2 times to Alaska, 1 time in the Caribbean, and 1 time on the
Mexican
California
Riviera
side of Mexico. So We've gone several times, and each time I've been able to interact with them, and we've talked about ways to make it easier to accommodate families who have disabilities. So it's been really, really good. And we've been working on the excursion side and talking about how to better accommodate those travelers with their excursions. And I'm so excited about the partnership with Will the World. So it's official now that Holland America and Will the World have a partnership for their Alaska
Nice.
trip. So it's very, very exciting. We've got some wonderful accessible excursions there, and we're going to continue working on building out some more accessible excursions in other areas as well. So that's a lot of fun, really exciting things there. The big issue for me is still that tendering and still just the rest of the excursions. I really try to focus when I have somebody who has a mobility disability, try to get them on cruises that don't have any tendering at all, because that's the easiest. But then we do need to talk about tendering because it can be complicated and it's a little bit harder. For example, when I was on the cruise this past week, we had 2 tender ports. One of them was Puerto Vallarta, the other was Cabo, and Cabo is always a tender. Puerto Vallarta was listed at first as a dock location, but it ended up changing to a tender location. And when I got on the ship, they said that they would not be able to accommodate me on the tender at all. And I kind of thought at first, well, do I fight this? Do I stay on board? And I ended up that first day deciding to stay on board so that I could kind of document what there was to do if we are not able to get ashore. And so we played pickleball, we did the pool, we did the spa. That was fun. But I kept getting pictures from other people showing that they lifted wheelchairs onto the tender. So, which they had told me they would not do. So that was a real curiosity for me. So then when we got to Puerto Vallarta, I went ahead and went down there, and it was a non-issue. They brought me down the elevator to be level at the loading station, and then they just picked up my chair and loaded it right on. So it was possible to tender, at least in a manual wheelchair.
Right. Now, I've not ever tendered at Puerto Vallarta. I've always landed on the dock there.
Yeah.
So I'm not that familiar with that one. What I've found with tenders is most tender boats are 2 levels. And where you get on the tender from the cruise ship, if that matches the dock level to get off on the dock, you're okay. Now, I'm a little different than you. I can, with a little bit of nerves, go up the gangplank and onto the tender on my little scooter.
Right.
But it's got to be the same level. If it's the different level, then you have to go up and down the stairs.
Correct.
Then that eliminates me totally.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And if you have the ability to take steps, it's a non-issue. Like if you can take 2 to 3 steps, then you're fine. But it's people like me who aren't able to take steps when tendering that it becomes a bigger issue because they don't want the liability. They don't want to take the risk there. So, but there are a few ships where they're doing better, where they have better equipment and they're able to make that tender easier.
Yeah. Now I'm finding a completely mixed bag. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Exactly.
One of the areas that needs more work than others are the private islands that you have to tender to, because that's always the different level.
Absolutely.
I've not seen a tender at a private island that I could get to.
Yeah, that is tricky. I did tender on Holland America to their private island. I was able to tender, but it was difficult. And I think we did come off on an area where it had steps and they had to carry my chair down, which again, not that difficult with the manual wheelchair that a ton, but
carrying you in a manual chair is a little different than carrying my big fat, on a scooter. I mean, it would take a crane. See, a couple guys can pick you up. That's fine.
Right. It's not going to work for everybody. Yeah. So it depends on the equipment. It depends on the total weight. There's a lot that has to go into it in order to make that safe or even possible. So that's kind of the big issue. And then of course, once you get to the private island, there's the issue. Most of them now do have the beach wheelchairs, which is fabulous. But things that they forget about, making sure there's a table that isn't in the sand, making sure that there are things that I can get to participate in, even though they have the beach wheelchairs. Those things are very, very difficult to push. So if I'm on a girls' trip and there's not somebody with a decent amount of strength to push that beach wheelchair, then it doesn't matter that they have the beach wheelchair.
Or if you're like me and travel solo, that's
that too.
That's a whole another can of worms.
Right.
All right. Because I promised I would not tie you up all morning today, I have to ask you one quick story to relate how you turned what would be just an absolute horrifying situation into something hysterically funny. Please tell us about your bus trip it was in San Diego. It was the bus trip.
Anaheim to San Diego. So I had the distinct pleasure of joining Ms. Wheelchair America 2022 in Disneyland for a few days, which was an absolute blast. And we were one of the first people to find out about the new wheelchair dolls on the Small World attraction, which we were super excited about. But then I had to get to San Diego to depart for my cruise. And I wanted to take the train, but there were no more train tickets, at least not for somebody in a wheelchair, that were at a decent hour. So I thought, okay, well, it's not that long of a ride. I'll go ahead and take the bus. So I went online, I purchased my bus ticket, marked that I was a wheelchair user and that I would stay in my wheelchair on the bus. And I showed up at the bus station ready to go. And the bus driver pulls in and he starts loading everybody else. And then he comes up to me and goes, "You're not on this bus." I said, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, "You're not on my list." And I said, "Well, here's my bus ticket." And I showed him my phone where it showed my ticket with the wheelchair. And he goes, "They didn't tell me to expect a wheelchair." I said, "Well, I'm here and I'm getting on this bus." And he said, "Well, I don't have room for you. There's no space for your chair." And kind of looked at him and I said, well, we're going to have to figure this out because I'm getting on this bus one way or another." So in the end, what we did, because I know that I have decent arm strength, he didn't move the seats because there were too many people on the bus to do that. And so all the seats stayed where they were, including the row right in front of the lift. He put me on the lift and we went up. And keep in mind, everyone, I'm wearing a dress, which kind of plays into the story. I love wearing dresses. They're so much easier until moments like this. So I get up on the lift and the ramp to connect the lift to the bus can't go down because the seats are in the way. And so the bus driver is kind of flipping out. He's like, "I don't know what to do. I don't know how we're going to do this. What are we doing here?" And I said, It's fine. I'll just crawl over." So I wheeled up as close as I could to the ramp. So it comes about up to my knees, pull my legs over, and I'm sitting there talking to the people on the bus. There are only guys in the back of the bus. It's only guys. So I'm like, I need somebody to hold my stuff. And now I'm so sorry, guys. I'm going to flash you here. So please just, be polite, turn away. And I pulled myself up and out and into the seat of the bus, and the bus driver was just kind of looking at me with this expression of, "I can't believe this just happened." But I made it into the seat and made it all the way to San Diego. And I just have to say, I'm really, really glad I was wearing one of my favorite pairs of underwear.
Oh, God. I knew the story and I'm still laughing until I got tears in my eyes. Oh, that's just terrific. Well, Kristy, thank you so much for giving us some advice for flying this week. For those of us that are flying, I'm still driving to cruises. I don't want to get on airplanes again. I'm going to have to because I'm going to Europe now. So that's I can make it one way, but I can't make it the other way. So.
Well, anyway, thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
And have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you.
I hope to talk to you real soon.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Kristy. And we'll be back with today's news after a quick break from one of our network sponsors. Oh, that was great. All right, before we get to the new news for today, I have to talk a little bit more about my story from yesterday. And some of you have probably seen it. Some of you might have seen it yesterday when I went live unexpectedly. Some of you may have seen it on the short video format that I tried up last night and had thousands of views. So that was a good trial. But I did get some feedback from my European folks that I felt was worth sharing you, since basically, as Mike called it, my rant yesterday against Fred Olsen. First of all, I did hear from Louise Rickson, who was on board and said the storm was just relentless. I heard from my coach, my pronunciation coach, and Dennis. It's Fincantieri. Is that better? That's one of the ones that I slaughtered. But anyway, Dennis said that the Balmoral's captain was probably under massive corporate pressure to reach port on time. The only way to avoid the North Sea storm would have been to seek calmer waters and wait it out before transitioning, and that is not so easy along the Norway to UK shipping lanes. I doubt the captain will be disciplined. That's from Dennis, who's, of course, down in Greece and knows quite a bit about any kind of sailing around Europe. And this was from my buddy Mike. Like I said, he started off, I heard your rant from Fred Olsen on the replay. And this is a post from one of the passengers on board. Arrived home from our first cruise with Fred on Friday. It was fabulous. Attentive staff, excellent food, beautiful Balmoral. Captain Val did all he could to protect passengers from the gale force experience from Mull to Dover. Balmoral took a battering, as did the passengers, crockery, glassware, and a couple of windows. We arrived at 12:30 p.m. instead of 2 a.m. The staff were so professional, though. Well done, Fred. I'm sure we'll sail on you again. Well, I mean, I saw several posts like that, and quite frankly, I was still offended that they would take that to cruise into that storm. But now I'm softening that position somewhat. Mike goes on to say, the facts are that a force 11 was not forecast by the London meteorology folks. We don't have a sophisticated hurricane watch service like the U.S. Secondly, when Force 11 was reported, the ship was in, I lost the place there for a second. The ship was in, the North Sea. If you look on your globe, you'll see how little space is available and how little shelter there is. I traveled back transatlantic on Balmoral through a Force 12 near the Azores. This time there was a lot of sea space, but we couldn't outrun the storm. Also, we had to refuel in the Azores to get back to Southampton. The two tugs in the Azores were not available. One was in Madeira being repaired. The other was damaged and stuck in San Miguel. That's where I learned that the Balmoral can cope perfectly well with Force 12 winds, but the passengers have to listen to the captain's advice. When he says stay in your cabin, stay there. If you can eat, room service is available and it's free. So, okay, maybe there wasn't any viable options and this thing caught him by surprise. I will soften my position on that somewhat. Still, man, I just think it's terribly, that's a terrible situation that you have to take a cruise ship full of crew and passengers into a storm like that. But yes, I will accept the fact from you guys that know more about it, sailing over there than I do. But wow, just an awful situation for everybody involved. So that's Fred Olsen's I Soften My Objection. How's that? All right. Carnival celebration. Long-awaited naming and christening for the celebration was properly celebrated on Sunday evening, just hours after Carnival's new flagship first arrived at its home port in Miami. Wet weather and the Sunshine State did not damper the festivities, which included attendance by cruise line executives, shipyard executives for Meyer Turku, where Carnival celebration was constructed. The ship's godmother and godfather, godmother and godgrandmother, as well as key figures for different elements of the ship, including Emerald Lagasse, Romero Brito, and Rudy Sotoman, were in attendance via remote operation. Carnival Celebration's godmother, Cassidy Gifford, released the oversized champagne bottle that broke across the name of the ship's bow, officially christening the new ship, while confetti scattered over the assembled guests. Of the crew complement for Carnival Celebration, 50 team members on the new ship also worked on the original celebration in service from 1987 to 2008. In fact, Carnival Celebration's captain, Vincenzo Alcaraz, first served as a deckhand on the original celebration. I was, by the way, on the original celebration. After the formal naming, guests and dignitaries were treated to a special live concert from Kool and the Gang, performing, you guessed it, Celebration, the perfect song for the new ship and one often played on Carnival cruises. Carnival Celebration will depart Miami today on her first Caribbean sailing, a 6-night Eastern Caribbean itinerary, calling on Grand Turk, the Dominican Republic, and Nassau. The ship will home port at Miami year-round, offering Eastern, Western, and Southern Caribbean itineraries. The new 183,000 gross ton flagship is the second in the LNG-powered XL class and sister to the Mardi Gras, which joined the fleet in 2021. Carnival Celebration has a guest capacity of 5,374 at double occupancy. The ship that was in the headlines for all the wrong reasons back in early 2020 has finally made a comeback. Diamond Princess welcomed guests on board for the first time since the industry-wide shutdown. The ship kick-started its inaugural sailing out of San Diego yesterday and became the final ship in the fleet to return to service. The Diamond Princess is a welcome sight for the Port of San Diego by helping to increase tourism for the city and support local businesses. The port expects its busiest cruise season since 2010, as the cruise industry is back fully sailing. The vessels have shifted from sailing Alaska to further south along the U.S. West Coast. San Diego's season started on September 19th with the arrival of Star Breeze, operated by Silversea. Disney Wonder was the second ship to resume the season on September 23rd. Princess is expanding offerings from the port for the first time with 13 sailings. The Port of San Diego is poised to cater to 140 cruises during the season, bringing almost 460,000 passengers through the port. Diamond Princess' inaugural voyage from San Diego, which departed yesterday, is a 7-night Baja Mexican itinerary. The voyage includes a call to Loreto on the 23rd, La Paz on the 24th, and Cabo on the 25th, before arriving back in San Diego on the 27th. The ship will offer a series of new itineraries from 5 to 16 days, including the Mexican Riviera, California coast, and Hawaii. There will also be a one-time round-trip 20-day cruise to Central America, departing the port on November 27th. Diamond Princess will be based in San Diego through February of 2023. Disney Fantasy assisted the United States Coast Guard vessels on yesterday, on Sunday, as part of a search and rescue operation when a homemade refugee craft was reported capsized in the cruise ship's vicinity. While most of the refugees were rescued, several were reported to have drowned before rescue vessels arrived. The incident occurred approximately 50 miles south of Little Torch Key, putting it midway between the Florida Keys and Cuba. This area has been a common location for refugees rescues in the past few months. Several individuals were rescued, but 4 refugees were reported to have drowned quickly when their makeshift craft capsized. While the overall weather in the area was clear, waves were averaging 6 to 8 feet, winds about 30 miles per hour. In those conditions, it could be challenging for individuals to remain safely buoyant without proper gear. According to the Coast Guard, the individuals who drowned were not wearing life jackets or other flotation devices. And in a story that's quite close to my heart, after being delivered to MSC Cruises last week, the MSC Seascape is starting its first voyage, set to spend the inaugural season sailing from Miami. The new cruise ship is kicking off a transatlantic crossing to the U.S., departing Civitavecchia. The 17-night itinerary features visits to 5 different ports before arriving in New York City in early December. The city will serve as scenario for the ship's naming ceremony, which is set to take place on December 7th. According to MSC, the star-studded event will bring company's European style and glamour to the Big Apple, with the award-winning actress Sophia Loren serving as the ship's godmother. She's been known to stay on the ship after being godmother and sailing, the first sailing, which I'll be on. So it would be pretty cool if Sophia Loren happens to be on the boat, and I can interview her for this program. How awesome would that be? Wow. How old is Sophia Loren? I know she still looks awfully good. Anyway, all right. Pictures got eaten up again. Oh well. All right, the final story of the day. Earlier this week, United Airlines resumed commercial passenger flights between the United States and Cuba after more than 2.5-year hiatus. The U.S. carrier now offers 2 daily flights to Havana, one from Newark Liberty International Airport and one from Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport. The connectivity between the 2 countries has exploded in the past few weeks. And man, there's been no talk about this at all. As of November 2022, that's this November, 4 airlines are offering 147 weekly flights from the United States to Cuba. These carriers are American, JetBlue, United, and Southwest Airlines. So that got me to thinking, now wait a minute. I was under the impression that we couldn't go to Cuba. So I had to do some further research on how these the airlines flying. I thought when President Trump pulled the plug on Cuba travel, which also killed so many of the cruise ships that were small and could sail into Havana, they have now all been scrapped. I thought Cuba travel was dead. But it apparently is not. So I did some checking, and there is a wonderful resource website, Travel to Cuba with a U.S. passport, 2022 rules. Okay. I found some of this terribly interesting. You can fly from hometown airport to Cuba on a major airline with 2 stops or less. You can even go non-stop from New York, JFK, from Miami, from Fort Lauderdale, and a few other cities. Cuban government allows Americans to visit their country. The restriction on reasons for travel and where you can spend money are all on American rules. So regardless of American regulations, your U.S. passport is valid in Cuba. That's one thing that you need to know. Officials in Cuba and the U.S. usually don't ask many questions, so take a deep breath and get excited about going to Cuba. A few things to keep in mind about your passport. You will need a full-size passport. Passport card will not work. It's wise to make sure your passport will not expire at least 6 months after the date of your trip. Cuban officials do not enforce this rule, but some airlines and cruise lines do. Notice they've got cruise lines back in this as well. Maybe they know something that we don't know. You must declare a valid travel category. There's all kinds of things of interest to do this, but the bottom line, it's a self-declared category and can be things like visiting a beach or going to a museum or interviewing a local artist, or there can be travel categories of any ilk. Beaches, you're going to dance, to learn Cuban dancing. You're going for the nightlife, Cuban theater, for food, for street food, for any number of things. Those are all legitimate travel categories. You must get a tourist card. Cuban government requires travelers from most countries, including the U.S., to have a Cuban tourist card, that's sometimes called the Cuba visa, in order to enter the country. It's easy to obtain online or through your airline, usually at the airport. There's detailed instructions on getting a tourist card and a guide, the easiest way to get a Cuban visa, in this resource. And the resource is called Viajero, Viajero. Get valid health insurance. Travelers to Cuba are required to have Cuban health insurance. This one I had no idea about. The easiest way to get this is at the airport in Havana. They'll have a booth set up before customs where you can purchase a policy for just a few dollars per travel day. And you must prepare an itinerary for where you're going to be in Cuba. Anything that's full-time on the schedule is 6 hours per day is considered full-time. If you're visiting independent museums, talking with local artists, or getting to know your casa hosts, then you can spend a Saturday afternoon at the beach or taking an independent tour without worrying. Okay? You do have to put on the itinerary if you're going to spend 6 hours doing something in particular. There is a restricted list from the U.S., not from Cuba. The restricted list is one of the most recent rules released regarding travel to Cuba. It's maintained by the U.S. State Department, and it lists organizations with connections to the Cuban military. Americans are not allowed to spend money at any business on this list. You cannot stay at any of the hotels. You cannot eat at the restaurants. You cannot work with any of the travel companies. If they're on the restricted list, folks, stay away. Don't run the risk of screwing it up. The other thing is keep detailed records and receipts, because you could be called on to prove how you spent your money and where you spent it for 5 years after you return from Cuba. I found this absolutely fascinating. I had no idea that we were moving back toward travel to Cuba. Was not aware of the airlines that are now flying to Cuba. It maybe, just maybe, a day will come where we'll see cruises back to Cuba. And you know, I was on two that got canceled when President Trump pulled the plug. So I'd like to go myself. All right, that's the end of the news portion of today. Let's see who's fussing at me today. Amy's with us. Hi, Amy. Kenneth's with us up in Pennsylvania. There's Cindy. Hi, Cindy. Robert's with us. Says, hey, everyone. Happy Monday. Good news, Chillie. The Epic Cruises are upgraded to balcony, and we got the handicapped accessible room and some cabin for both cruises. Very nice. Hot air, Tom. I am really looking forward to that. And yes, folks, I realize it's not until the spring of 2025. But we're looking at, if any of you might be interested in joining us, obviously a major expenditure to do, 20, Hot Air Tom and I are doing, I think it's 27 days total on the ship, a couple days in New York, a couple days in Rome. But we got lots of time, folks. Just like I'm going to set aside like $100 a month so that when the time comes for make the final payments, I got the money sitting here. Wait. So yeah, and that's terrific news, Hot Air, that you were able to upgrade us and get us to in a handicap accessible room. That'll give me room to be able to charge my scooter without running over your foot. Nikki's with us. Hi, Nikki. Hot Air says hello to everybody. Sunny's here. Hi, Sunny. Hi, everyone. Hi, Kristy. Kristy, I just love her to death. Oh, my goodness. And the story about her in the dress on the bus. Oh, my goodness. That was hysterical. I mean, I would be just absolutely panicked in that situation, folks. I admit it. And she just handles it like it's nothing. And turn it around and make it something you can laugh at. So, Joanne's with us. Frozen like Elsa. Yeah, man, it is cold. I don't know, 21 degrees here this morning. Yeah, and no, I did not go out walking. Of course, I can't walk anyway. More than about 10 feet. Incredible memories travel. That would be. Kristy is in the audience. The picture of the ship yesterday. Yeah. Chillie, she's always a great guest to have. I agree, Kenneth. She's wonderful. Eddie's with us. Yo, Brooklyn in the house. Good morning, everybody. Eddie says, I can't imagine the waves going over the top of the ship. That's crazy. Yeah, and I tell you, I wasn't upset. I even said that when my first broadcast, and yeah, it wasn't a rant. That if some of you guys that over there know more about it than I do, please let me know. And they did. So that softens it some that it came up. They didn't know about it. I'm thinking they had to know about it ahead of time. So, okay, they got crappy weather over there. But then I can also see where there's just not much of any place between, Maldi and the UK to hide. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just, I know people like to go for the Northern Lights, but maybe this time of year with those kinds of storms, not the safest thing to do. I don't know. I have very mixed opinions about that one still. Your story on American Airlines was awful. They treated you incredibly. Glad you made your connection. That's a whole nother story I could have gotten into. Well, because that was that's another great place. I might even use that post on the website one day, because that'll make a whole post, just that story alone from Kristy. It's another terrific one she's had on her Facebook page. Sonny says, yo, Eddie, I'm still looking for a hotel in New Orleans. Looking at TripAdvisor reviews, there's nowhere that doesn't have a bed bug, double, triple room charges, break-ins, and stolen items from rooms. I've almost decided, Sonny, that, I'm driving. I'm probably going to stop several hours short of New Orleans rather than going in and staying the night before the cruise. I'm probably going to stop short a couple hours and drive in that morning. I've got to find parking. One of the things I hope to do today is to contact the port in New Orleans and see if they have valet parking for handicap. So I haven't made a final decision on that, but I'm looking right now. Robert says Cuba would be fantastic to visit. Yeah, I'm thinking with all this movement from people that I wasn't expecting it from, maybe there's things going on that we're not aware of. I mean, I've fussed about Biden and not moving back toward Cuba. I mean, I realize he's been busy with some other things. I understand that. But I've been critical of the administration, and maybe they've been doing it behind the scenes and under the radar all along that I was totally unaware of. I mean, that's very possible, folks. I'm not one that has the biggest connections in the world. I am impressed. Just sent the news on United in Cuba this morning. Chillie earns an A for quick research. Well, I saw that story and I jumped all over it. So 30 in a wake up. There he is. How you doing? 9 days in a wake up. Tell my Panama Canal cruise on Princess. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to be on Holland America's new Staten Dam on December the 3rd, and then on MSC Seascape on December the 11th. That's my next journey. So I'm going to be on the ships about the same time you are. Of course, you're going to be in the Panama Canal, and I'm going to be in the Eastern Caribbean, but be on the same days. Cindy, come on, tongue. Cindy says I stayed at Place d'Armes in New Orleans a few years ago. Small rooms, but no negative feedback. Man, I'd have plans for that Euro trip. Is France involved at all in this cruise? Yes, we're staked. Both parts of it stop at Cannes, down on the French Riviera. And when I say both parts of it, we got the Transatlantic cruise, which ends up in Civitavecchia. I'm saying that wrong, and I don't remember. That's one that Dennis corrected me on because I've been saying it wrong. Civitavecchia. I don't remember. Anyway, Dennis corrects me, and I get it right for a time or two, and then I forget because I'm getting old. But anyway, but so you got the Transatlantic. Once it gets over there, a couple of stops in Portugal, Cannes, Barcelona, a couple of stops in Italy, and then we do the Greek Isles cruise, which also circles back around and goes back to Cannes and back to a couple of other places in Italy, and then back into Civitavecchia, or however you say it. Civitavecchia. No, that's not right. I can't remember. I'm sure Dennis will send me Civitavecchia spelled out again for the proper pronunciation. Hot Air says Chillie loves Slidell. I did stay in Slidell. That was where I had the tornado aimed right at my head. Yeah, that was but the hotel was nice. So I might look into that as well, because that's not that far. If I can find an adequate parking close to the port, that will handle, people like me. A very cool gateway for our paths to cross. Absolutely. We're going to end up on a cruise together one of these days. I promise you. Transatlantic departs March 31st. That's March 31st, 2025. Stopping in Santorini. Oh, the second. No, with stops in Bermuda, Ponta Delgado, Lisbon, Barcelona, Cannes, Livorno, Naples, and then Civitavecchia. Second cruise is Civitavecchia, stopping in Santorini. Piraeus, that's Athens. Mykonos, Corfu, Valletta, that's Malta, Messina, Naples, Livorno, and Cannes, back in France again, and ends up back in Civitavecchia. So one's a 16-day and one's an 11-day. I think it ends up on April 27th, I want to say, in Rome. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow or another day. So, all right, guys, that's going to wrap me up for today. It's been to me, it's been a really good show. My special thanks again to Kristy. Goodness knows, I love her to death. Honest to goodness, I do. She's another one I want to end up on a trip with one of these days. I think that would be fantastic. So, I can learn so much from her. It's just amazing. Anyway, special thanks to Kristy for being with us today, and all you guys for being here. I do appreciate it. That's it for today, guys. I'll be back tomorrow. We won't do a show on Thursday. No show at all for the holiday, but I will be here the rest of the week. And Wednesday afternoon, we're going to do the Cruise Amigos a day early because of the holiday. So that's going to wrap it up for today. As always, folks, stay safe, stay healthy, think about cruising, and hopefully one day soon we'll all get together on the high seas. This is the old fat travel guy. Have a fantastic day, y'all.
I regularly post videos on all facets of the travel and cruise industry. So if you like to keep up with the latest in cruise ships, ports of call, cruises themselves, Chillie chats, and travel and cruise industry news, just hit the little subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner, hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when a new video is up or we go live. This video was produced by Chillie's Cruises.